Hello everyone, welcome back to Unit Design. We're here in week 3 or topic 3 where we're talking about backwards design and constructive alignment. Before we start talking about the new topic, it's a good idea to review what we learnt last week. So last week, or in our last topic, we learnt about learning outcomes, which sometimes are called learning objectives. So these learning outcomes that we may have for our unit. Remember that learning outcomes come in different levels of our design process. So we could have learning outcomes for the overall program, like for example for one Masters of Philosophy. Then we may have learning outcomes for a specific unit inside that program. For example, it could be one unit on ethics. And we have learning outcomes for lessons as well. So a specific lesson, this is what we want to achieve by the end of the lesson. So what I would like you to achieve by the end of this lesson is for you to have an introductory understanding of backwards design and to take the previous knowledge that we've learned about learning outcomes and think about how they could be applied to the concepts that we're learning today. So remember that with learning outcomes, we usually relate them to knowledge or skills, or they're usually related to knowledge or skills, things that we want people to be able to say that they know or things that they can do or show in some way. They usually start with a sentence stem. We write them at the beginning of our lesson or at the start of designing our course, something like by the end of this unit, students will be able to sometimes see them in a student-facing way as well, where it's written for the student to read. By the end of this lesson, I will be able to. Or we sometimes see that I can checklist in different learning contexts. They usually start with a verb, and it's important to sort of remember that we need to have those actionable verbs, or verbs that show something. It's quite hard to quantify or talk about things like knowledge or an understanding of something. It's easier to think about maybe how students demonstrate knowledge. They also should be things that are relevant. So definitely relevant to the course. We don't want to say, okay, so it's important for people who are learning about ethics to talk about horticulture, unless they can talk about horticulture from a perspective that shows that there's an understanding of ethics or applying a concept in ethics to horticulture. We also need to make sure that learning objectives align with the Australian qualifications framework levels. So remember that we don't want to have learning objectives that are too difficult or too easy. We want to make sure that they sort of match the learners where they're at and what types of things they are trying to achieve in the course. So keeping all that in mind, we come back to this question every time. How do we usually design a unit? What do we do? What do you think about? Maybe we think about articles we've read before. This is a really important article. It's canonical. It's useful for the study in this field. Maybe we think about students and an activity that are really fun. Wow, students love doing jigsaws, so let's have a jigsaw reading activity. Maybe we go back in time to when we were students, we're in a bit of a hurry. Okay, I'm going to upload my own notes from when I was a student. I know that I've done that before. But it's important to come back to that design thinking strategy. When we're doing a unit, we may have all these things in mind that could be good ideas, it could be not the best ideas, but we can come back to knowing whether they're good or bad ideas by thinking about the overall goals of what we want students to achieve. So today we'll talk a little bit about backwards design and constructive alignment. In the future, we may talk about the subtle differences between them, but they're two theories or two methods that were designed to basically be used as a planning strategy that will allow students to achieve their desired results, which those results are what we are framing as our learning objectives. So I've just got some information here about who those theories or those strategies come from, and you can have a read of those in your free time. So why would we design in this way? Designing in this way has many benefits. I didn't write it here, but for me, it's one of the benefits is efficiency. And efficiency could be explained by all of these characteristics of we've got intentionality. We want to know, we want to have purpose for ourselves or as a designer of a unit, for yourself if you're the instructor and you're delivering a unit. You want to know why you're doing it, what's the purpose of things, and for students as well. Students want to know why they're doing something. They want to make sure that there's a real purpose behind things that they're doing. It's also learner-centered. So we're putting that the learner first, thinking about what's relevant to them, what's interesting to them, what's appropriate for their level, and keeping that quality level. So backwards design and constructive alignment are a strategic process. They generally have 3 stages. In the first stage, we think, okay, what should students have learned by the end of the course? The second stage, we move on to how students demonstrate their learning through assessment. So we did talk a little bit about assessment as well, and we'll talk more about that next time. We then think about the teaching and learning. So that's the content that would allow students to understand this knowledge, the materials, the activities, and the teaching methods as well. And then there's this 4th stage, which is sometimes considered in the literature, sometimes it's not, whether it's a stage or not, but it's about reviewing the design and making sure that everything there does come back to those original goals. So we're not straying with things that are potentially irrelevant. So this is sort of what we were talking about before as well, about design thinking. It's a continual process where we keep coming back to checking things. It's cyclical. We want to make sure that everything makes sense and works for what we're actually trying to teach. So I did want to mention as well that when we are designing a unit, we typically think about the topics and the assessment, but curriculum does also include instruction and delivery. So sometimes you're planning a unit, you're not actually the person who will be delivering the course, but we do need to keep that in mind when we're designing. So let's talk about this more in class. Before you come to class, you should do your elements of design review activities, which you can find on the Leo site. You can use your unit planning planner, thinking about the unit that we talked about in class last week and applying that. And you can complete the readings for the week making sure that you go through those questions as well and come to class prepared. Here's some references. You can feel free to have a look at these, but please do your readings over these. See you in class, everyone.